Well, hello everybody. I'd have to say you're a little late to the game today, but that's not your fault. That's my fault. Normally, when I share a recipe with you, I practice it first, and I make sure that the things I'm sharing with you work and that they're good. Today, I'm doing something a little different. I found a recipe on the internet, and I'm trying it here with you for the first time. So you'll get to see all my mess and how I create, but I hope that won't put you off at all, and that you'll join me here as I get to work. I'll be right back. You came back. That's wonderful. So today I am making a sort of a bumbleberry cheesecake, coffee cake. Hope that comes through okay. It was supposed to be raspberry, but our local store had no raspberries, and I didn't want to use strawberries in it. So I bought some frozen berries. It says to use fresh, so I'm not sure how that's going to work out either, but that's how we learn things, right? Trial and error. And I'm not going to give you the values for the things that I'm putting in. I'll tell you what I'm putting in, but not the amounts, because tricky thing, a real life kitchen thing, is that the recipe calls for a 9-inch springform pan, and all I have is a 10-inch. So I've taken some liberties with some of the measurements to make sure that the pan is a little fuller. And so I will give you a link to the place where I got the recipe from, and on there then you could follow along with the recipe for your springform pan, which calls for 9-inch. So in the bowl I'm creamed some butter and sugar, and now I'm going to add 2 whole eggs. These are farm eggs, and apparently I'm going to add them all at one time, which wasn't the plan, but these are farm eggs, so I broke them first into a bowl to make sure that everything was good with them before I start to bake with them. My niece and their farm is doing really well in the hen house. They've been banging eggs out of there for quite a while. The one poor hen, she's laying eggs that are so big you can't close the lid on the egg carton. And they are always a double yolk at least, and at least once it's been a triple yolk. So she's definitely earning her keep. So I've got this pretty well incorporated, and now I'm just going to follow along with the recipe, and it says that I need to add to my wet ingredients sour cream. So I am going to dump in the sour cream, and I have to say that for baking recipes, unless it otherwise calls for low fat sour cream, I always use kind of a fuller fat. And what I'm talking about in this case is I use the 14% sour cream. I just like the way that it holds up when you bake with it, and it's not so runny. So that's what I use when I bake. So I'm going to mix that in there well. And I love this. I know that's probably weird for some of you, but I do love the smell of sour cream, and I enjoy it on a lot of different things. I'm also now going to add some vanilla, which I've brought along here and put on the counter. I know you're supposed to measure with a proper measuring spoon, but I'm going to measure with the cap. I'm sure some of you must do that as well. I don't normally I follow the rules because you may be more comfortable with me doing that, but maybe at your house you measure with the cap too. So now it's got to go into the sink to wash the cap because it's got vanilla all over it. Oh boy. I'm going to stir that all in, and now we're going to move along to the dry ingredients. And I am not going to be fussy about the dry ingredients, although I'm sure that you should. I am going to measure them right into the vessel that I'm mixing the wet ingredients with, and we'll just see how it all works out. So to measure my flour, I watched this really interesting fellow who's a baker on YouTube, and he said that really we should be measuring our flour so that we're not packing it down so much, because recipes are tried in test kitchens, and in the test kitchen they're following all the rules that, you know, we would have learned in home ec class, which is to spoon the flour in and to cut the top off of your flat edge, and that we can pack a lot of flour into a cup when we scoop it in to fill the cup full of flour, which is more than what the recipe was intended to have. And I thought, yeah, that's one of those things that we learned back in home ec class, but who really does it anymore? After you've got some experience, you tend to leave those home ec classes behind and just kind of go on your own. But it never hurts to be reminded sometimes that baking is science. Cooking is a whole different thing. You can add a little bit or take away a little bit and it doesn't really affect it. But because we're using baking powder and baking soda to help leaven it, we need to know what the correct measurements are so that we don't mess that up. I'm just double checking here to make sure I've got the right numbers in my, not quite doubling, little over a half, you know, because I changed it up a little bit. And now I'm going to add the baking powder and the baking soda and some salt. So, but I do need to get a measuring spoon for those. Grab the salt from the cupboard. And so I'm just going to measure these in without telling you the values, as I said, because the recipe won't match up. So in goes some baking powder, in goes some baking soda. If I'm remembering right from those days that our teacher was talking to us, which was a really long time ago now, one of them, I'm not sure which one, I think the baking powder helps it rise and the baking soda keeps it up, but I'm not really sure. But they each have a purpose, and that's why sometimes a recipe will call for both of them and sometimes it'll only call for one or the other. But in this case it's both of them. So, and just a bit of salt. So in goes the salt. Now, because as I said, I've never made this before, I'm just going to run through my ingredients and I'm going to make sure that I have everything in the bowl. I do. So now I'm going to go ahead and just give them a good mix, and then we'll move on to the next step, because this is actually a 3-part recipe. This is the kind I don't normally take on because it dirties every bowl in the house, but today when I woke up it was minus 26 degrees and I don't want to have to worry about frozen water lines, so I don't mind today if I have to run an extra load of dishes in the dishwasher to keep the lines warm. This weather came upon us quite quickly. It's been kind of a weird winter weather, and we are expected to be out of this brutal part of the cold. I know there's lots that have it much worse than we do. There's lots of people that really enjoy it, including my husband, who, as I think I've said before, is a logging truck driver. And they really love this weather because it lets them haul on the frozen roads, and that's when hauling is best for them. So I'm just going to step aside now and grab the pan, and I'll be right back. So here I have the pan. It's a 10-inch springform pan. that I think I picked up because my old one had gotten so dented and banged up. I think I picked this one up at like a Value Village or a thrift store for just a couple of dollars, and it's in great shape. So now we're gonna pour, oh, I should explain what I did here in the bottom. I sprayed it with the baking spray, and then I put in a piece of parchment paper in the bottom, which I also sprayed, just so that when I go to release it out of the pan, it doesn't give me any issues. So I'm gonna pour the dough in here, and then I'm gonna smooth it out a bit. Mine looks like it might be a little thicker than what I saw in the recipe, but I'm gonna trudge ahead anyway, because it looks a bit like a biscuit dough almost. And honestly, if you weren't standing in the room, I would have licked my finger right now. So I'm just gonna spread it. Looks like the parchment paper wants to get away, but we are going to give it a fight. There we go. So I hope that it hasn't been too brutal where you live. I know that some of you have had really bad winter storms that you know, that you don't normally have in your area. And all over here near where we live, we may have been one of the warmer areas. There's parts of Canada that got into the real deep freeze at like minus 47 and 8 and 9 and so forth. But it's still a lot colder than we had anticipated. So we're not that thrilled about it. So this is a coffee cake. So coffee cakes normally have a strudel on top, or a streusel, I guess is the right way to say that. And this one, of course, also has the layer of cream cheese. I made those two ahead before. I thought, you know, what if I just got out the camera and filmed it anyway? We'll see what happens. If this fails, you're never going to see it, quite frankly. But no, I'm going to try and be fair and give you a good critique on it. So the next step in this is the cream cheese filling. Now in this bowl I have cream cheese, an egg white, I have cream cheese, an egg white, and some sugar. And I've mixed it up good, and I'm just going to, maybe I'll move you a little closer so you can see what's going on. There. So this is what it looks like at this point. Now I'm going to add the cream cheese, and I'm going to start just kind of putting small dollops all the way around, and then I will fill it in. I first saw this kind of recipe years ago when we had hockey billets at our house, and one of the boys who came to stay with us for the hockey season, his grandmother made these wonderful chocolate cupcakes with this cooked cream cheese topping on them. And she froze them. They were his favorite. What a great grandma. She froze them and she sent them to him in big bags. And of course she sent them for the whole family, which we benefit greatly from. And we love them. They're wonderful. And she was happy to share the recipe. And it's something that we still make today, thanks to this grandma who shared her recipe with us. So there's the cream cheese spread on there. And now they're asking for the berries to go on next. And as I said, I don't know about this. Now, this is kind of a bumbleberry mix, I guess. It's got blackberries in it. It's got raspberries. The raspberries didn't seem to hold up all that well. And it's got blueberries. And I'm just going to kind of plop them all over and see how well we can cover this cake. And I can feel that some of them are still frozen, which is my concern, is that they might be too wet. But again, we'll see. This is something we're going to experience together. If it's too wet, Next time we know we have to wait until the raspberries come into the store before we, or blackberries even, before we give this a try. Our blueberries, which berry is your favorite? I'd have to say mine is probably raspberries. I do love the berries. I like berries more than fruit, for sure. I really do like huckleberries. Man, I have every dish in the house used for sure, but that's okay. Now you know how I work behind the scenes. So the last bit to go on here is the streusel topping, and all that's in here is sugar, flour, butter. And most of you'll know how a streusel works, but you just bring it together in a crumble and put it all over the top. So I'm just going to use my hands and I'm just going to sprinkle it on like so. And that's kind of the last component in the coffee cake. Now, coffee cake isn't like your, normal average cake. It certainly doesn't have any coffee in it. It is to have alongside, though, a cup of coffee or tea. And lots of women in the 50s and 60s made coffee cakes because they used to visit a lot more than we visit today. So there's what it looks like all ready to go into the oven. And I am going to put it into a preheated 350 degree oven, and it's going to bake for about 45 minutes. And when the finished product comes out, I will bring you back. Thanks for watching. Well, folks, this cake turned out to be delicious. It was moist throughout and cut nicely, as you can see by the picture below. It held up really well, and it was so good. I would definitely make this again and recommend that you do as well. Please, if you know somebody that would enjoy this recipe as well, share it with them, like and subscribe. That would be fabulous. Take care, everybody. I'll see you next time.